Happy to be here with all of you today. Um, what I wanted to talk about today is perfectionism and at it today through the lens of working with it through CAP as a tool for undoing perfectionism, helping people move towards more freedom of thought and expression, and also looking at it as it emerges throughout the CAP experience and how to work with that. One of the things I think that's most powerful about working with any psychedelic is the ways that the non-specific amplification of the medicine can help to illuminate aspects of ourselves, of our clients that might be more subtle in our daily lives. So what is perfectionism? It's a lot of things. It can be self-oriented, socially just prescribed, and other-oriented. We can look at it through so many lenses. The ways that we connect to ourselves, our inner voice, the ways that we show up in relationships, the ways that we show up in community. As I've been investigating this and looking more into it, it's, really in some ways, it is such an inhibitor to true connection to ourselves, to others, and to all of those around us. Because what it's really saying is, perfectionism is this idea that we need to be hitting some pre-prescribed mark. And if we're not hitting that mark, we're not enough. I work with perfectionism with so many of my clients, and really the piece that we're trying to understand and turn is to how to turn the knob down. I say to my clients, it's so often we see our perfectionism as like a powerful trait. It's something that helps us to be really ambitious and to get ahead in life. And that is beautiful. And most people don't want to get rid of it completely. The piece that we want to work with is how we treat ourselves, how we speak to ourselves internally when we don't hit that mark, that idealized place that we wanted to be. So it's not so much about not striving for just for beauty, not striving for high achievement, but it's our relationship to that. Like so many things that we work with, it's less about the actual thing, the perfectionism, the wanting to be great, and it's more about our relationship to it and getting that into a healthy space. It really gets a lot in the way of connection to ourselves and others, as I was saying, in that if we are only allowing ourselves to show ourselves to somebody else when we're in a perfect place, what are we then showing them? We're just kind of giving them like this small piece. And as everybody is, or many people are moving into places of wanting deeper connection, more emotional intimacy, if we're hiding a part of ourselves, not going out to see our friends when we're in certain moods, not wanting to talk to people when we're in certain ways, not daring to share in groups until we have something that feels perfect, we're missing the opportunity for connection. The authentic connection that comes from being ourselves exactly as we are and believing that that's enough is so valuable and really something to continue to work towards allowing ourselves to open into. Perfectionism is very much an issue in a lot of mental health struggles, anxiety, depression, OCD, this idea that we're supposed to be something that we're not. And so often I see it as so much of the mental health struggles we have is the space between what we imagine we should be and where we are. And so if we can take that back a bit and be at peace with where we are while still striving for more, still striving to grow and evolve, it can really take away a lot of that pressure, that dissonance between our self-ideal and our true self. If we can see ourselves as evolving creatures, if our ideas of identity can be based more on the ways that we approach life, the ways that we evolve, then we're giving more space and more gracefulness to the process of being human, to our humanity. And I think that's a really important part of all of mental health that sometimes we forget about. So ketamine can be a really powerful way to unlock ingrained patterns within the human. We all kind of have an idea often that it helps us to see our ego as a part of us rather than just us. And ego is a very complicated word, and there can be many different meanings for how we can work with that. And my meaning is going to shift depending on who I'm speaking to, what I'm speaking about. But in general, I think it's the way that our mind developed from when we're born. Our mind is kind of awareness, but without much programming. And then as we evolve out of that space of, I'll just say, the non-duality of being inside of the mother, being born into the world, having just awareness come of ourself as an other, the move to detach from the mother, the move towards duality, to seeing yourself as an other, is the process of developing the ego. We often, it's the things that we think are us. Of course, this is a working model, and everybody might have different ways of understanding this part of themselves, but it's the things that we see as this is me versus you, the ways that we see our duality, the ways that we create projections, triggers that evolve, all of these things, the ways that we just expect ourselves to be, the way that we see other people, all of these things can be part of that mechanism of the mind that's kind of the thinking awareness, the frameworks. Kind of a messy definition, but we're trying to not be perfect today, right? I try to be in the meta in my presentations as well as in the content, because it's how do we approach everything. And I'm going to approach my shares with some level of preparation and ideas of how I want to be, but also allowing space for myself to sometimes stumble. So the ingrained patterns that come up are something that we are really able to help clients to work with through ketamine. It creates that neuroplasticity that allows us to pick up the sled that's been going down that same groove so many times and put it in a new place and try to create a new neural pathway. And that can be very helpful for people who are dealing with a lot of cognitive distortions, a lot of old frameworks, projections that have been unconscious, as they can become more in the mind, where we can work with them as not just us, but as a part of us. It can help to loosen the grip on ideas of what we are supposed to be. Perfectionism during preparation, journey, and integration is something that we can always be on the lookout for. And that can look like many different things. That can look like somebody who really has a strong idea of what this is going to be, thinking that this is going to change them in some huge way, and that they have these goals that are very specific. And it's something, of course, we want to allow our clients to share their goals, but how can we temper their expectations to allow them to have space to grow and evolve in ways that the medicine is going to guide them towards, and they are going to be participants in, but that we don't know exactly where that's going to be. We've all had clients that come in and say, my intention is one thing, and their journey is something totally different. And then, we say, well, get the journey you want, you get the journey you need. How do we understand what came up? How do we understand what was amplified through the non-specific amplification of the medicine that's allowing us to see a part to work with that perhaps we didn't think we wanted to work with, we didn't think it was important, but maybe it actually can give us some insight into what's holding us back, what our struggles are. In the journey, it can look like, people who maybe start to get uncomfortable, pop up, say that they're not feeling anything. They have an idea of what it's supposed to look like, and then it's not looking like that. So they kind of collapse. They're not feeling it. They're going to tell us something that feels like maybe a little defensive. And, that's not, how do we work with that? Because when they're showing us that, they're showing us a part of themselves that is in this perfectionist mindset. And it's important that we're not reinforcing the perfectionism, but allowing them to, feel seen and heard in that experience, and to to just have more curiosity for that part of themselves rather than to vilify or create a dissonance with that aspect of them. Okay. Yeah, so some common themes: failing the process, obsession with doing the preparation right. I mean, this is something I can go on and on about, but that so many of us on our spiritual journeys have hit a place where we said, oh my goodness, I'm using this perfectionist framework or model that I was using my whole life, and now I'm applying it to the spiritual journey, where it's like, oh, I've got to get to the bottom of this thing. I've got to get to the bottom of that thing. Every little shadow that comes up, I need to immediately deal with this, and I need to go all the way in. And it's like, yes, and how you guys are laughing. It's like we've all done this. It's so common. I do it sometimes, all the time still. It's like, it's just, you just notice yourself like in that space where you're frustrated that you're going through the same thing again. Why am I triggered by that again? Why am I sad? Why am I crying? I already went over this before. But that's the space to say, okay, wait, I'm a human. Maybe my grief doesn't fit a timeline that I would imagine it to, where it's just going to go up and down and gone. Maybe I can continue to have waves of grief. So in the preparation phase, when we see clients that want to do everything right, they want to be the good student, the good little girl or boy, these are ways that we can start to see that part of themselves. And I think it's a tricky thing for therapists, because we often have this. A lot of us are in that place where we want to be the good caregiver and be perfect. And we also, so then when clients come in and they're the perfect clients, it's very easy to just let that be that we're the best therapists. And of course, we explained it to them so well, and they're inspired by us. And that can be true. And it can also be true that a part of them is bringing in the transference of needing to be the perfect child for us, needing to be the perfect student. And how can we meet that part of them without shaming them for it? With just maybe, a gentle acknowledgement that this maybe is something that's coming up, and what would it be like for them if they didn't press as hard, or how are they going to feel if they don't meet the goal of eating perfectly in preparation, or whatever the thing is. Just helping them to kind of communicate between the different parts of themselves, the self that's wanting to be perfect, and then the self that is being protected through that perfectionist tendency. There's often there's something underneath there that thinks I'm not going to be enough if I don't do X, Y, or Z. So creating that safe container, normalizing uncertainty. I often, there's so often people say, oh, I'm realizing, how much I struggle to handle the unknown and to handle uncertainty. And I was just like, yeah, that's what we're all doing. That's kind of everything. If we were in a place, any of us, where we just felt completely at ease with all change, with all uncertainty, we would be enlightened. And I don't know anybody who's there. There's just, it's one of the aspects of life that's really complicated. I think it's when I'm looking at different aspects of ascension that a human can go into, one of the ways that I was defining spiritual ascension is the level of comfort that you can have with uncertainty, kind of that level of comfort with the unknown, with trusting in your path and what might come up, and also trusting just in yourself, trusting in your future self. I think that I've seen a lot with people, this idea of like, planning, worrying, because what might happen in the future could be terrible. And if I think about it a million times, then I'll be fine and it won't happen. And I just am like, are you not a person who can think on your feet? Are you not somebody who deals with crises well? I mean, I don't say it like that if I don't know them to be those things, but if I know that they already self-identify in those ways, it's just a way to see that dissonance within yourself. Your worrying is saying to yourself, I'm not going to be capable to handle this when it comes up. But the reality of your self identity is that you are somebody who can handle hard things. So, that can certainly apply to then, going into the ketamine journey. There can be fear about how to do it perfect, how to be the perfect client. And, how to, how they're going to lay there still. How do they imagine that they're going to be? How do they imagine they're going to show up? What's the fear that they might say something that feels embarrassing or move their body in a way that feels embarrassing, and how can they be comfortable with that? So just, even in that preparation stage, we can be addressing this part of our clients, as it's kind of everybody. I mean, everybody has this to some extent, I think, in different ways, but especially when we're working with a lot of high achieving, ambitious clients, it can be quite pervasive. Yes, so it can show up during the journey as a resistance to surrendering. I think a lot of people are very attached to the mind as the self, and it can be scary to allow the mind to drift, to begin to see the mind as something that is a part rather than the whole of the human. And so how can we make people more comfortable with that? There's a lot of ways. I tend to use my metaphor of like riding the crest of the wave, allowing yourself to not focus too much on what's behind or what's before, and just working on understanding that consciousness posture that can bring a real openness to the medicine, but also holding even that ideal very lightly. That it's not everybody's ideal. Ketamine journey does not need to mean being free from thoughts and floating on the crest of that wave. It can be wherever you're at and what feels right for you. And I say sometimes it's better for certain people to be driving their mind a bit more, to be in the experience of their mind, be in whatever's coming up, and working with it in a way that feels comfortable. Ketamine is not just for flying through visuals in the multiverse. It's also can be really powerful tool for being in a more grounded state and just examining our life and our relationship to parts of ourselves more through like a language-based thought process. Yeah, so this is all kind of encouraging a lot of self-compassion, which is huge, and the many ways that we can access that within people and allowing them to find space for more compassion for themselves and others is going to pay off in spades as they move through their life. Leaning into the unpredictability and, allowing there to be many different outcomes that are the right outcome. It does not have to look like just one thing. In the integration phase, this is a time when we can really work with these parts of the mind, as they can want, be looking for perfect insights. So often the clients that, have everything figured out and are highly, intellectual, it's beautiful, but it's also something to be on the lookout as how then we can be using that as a defense against maybe being in a more feeling state. I mean, I know myself, I definitely can easily fall into that. I had a friend recently kind of have to like hold me down and be like, no, like you didn't do anything wrong in that situation, as I tried to over explain how, I knew that already, and I was just explaining all these pieces, and it was like I could say the words, but she had to hold me down and look in my eyes and get me to get into the affect of like believing and surrendering to what she was saying. And there's just many different little sneaky defenses that we have. Yes, addressing the inner critic during integration sessions, emphasizing process over the outcome, allowing there to be space for just what is, that it doesn't have to mean that after one session you've cured your depression you've had for your whole life. That's not really a reasonable goal. And so much of what brings people to perfectionism is the idea that the goal is where we find our value. And I've talked a lot about this before. I'm not going to go into it too much, but when we can help people to reframe and find their value in their efforts, in their thought process, in the ways they're showing up for themselves, in the ways they're evolving and learning and growing and changing, it's going to help to pull some of that pressure off of the outcome-based thinking, which is the place where perfectionism is creating issues, when it's all about just hitting that mark and is success, and anything below it is not. But when the entire experience is a space to find value in yourself and out, and then it's just going to be a much healthier process. Just some further thoughts on roots of perfectionism is that I really believe that it's coming from a lot from our entire capitalist society. The ways that we have been kind of indoctrinated since much before any of us were alive into ideas of ourselves and others as objects to make money, to fit within this idea of a society that is based on financial gain as kind of the highest achievement. And within that, there's a lot of productivity mindset and just ideas of ourselves being tools for creation, tools for meeting the needs of the systems of our jobs, hitting benchmarks of society. And a lot of that is really taking us out of that internal space of self-awareness. It's taking us into a space of our value based on what we do versus on our being. And that is such a beautiful lesson that can come from working with ketamine or other psychedelics, is the remembering what it's like to just be. And, even if it's just for those few hours when they're in our office and they are just allowing themselves that deep peace, it's for many of us, it's a new experience of really just allowing there to be nothing happening, nothing that needs to happen. And so sometimes that is the lesson more than any beautiful insight that we get out of it, just that remembering of how our value doesn't need to be based on doing so much. And these are just some little ways that we can start to undo that productivity mindset, the capitalism that has infiltrated our consciousness and changed us from human beings into human doings. Also attachment wounds, childhood experiences. Many of us, I think our entire generation was raised much more on the good job for the achievement versus the acknowledgement of the process. A lot of us are looking for affirmation from somebody that to meet the need of what we didn't get from our parents. And shame, fear of failure, low self-worth can certainly be driving our perfectionist patterns. So there's a lot of space to get in there with our clients, and ketamine can really help to soften the ego structures that makes people believe that this is their whole value, and just to start to find some space for that more intrinsic motivation, the value based on how things feel, how it feels to be the human in the body, the human in the mind, versus how other people perceive it to be, whether that's us or society or their family. Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to stop for now.